teaching information has value. So welcome everyone. For anyone who does not know me, my name is Jane Hammonds. I'm an assistant professor in the University Libraries at Ohio State. I'm the teaching and learning engagement librarian. And my email is hammonds.73. So if you do have any questions or comments, you can always email me at hammonds.73@osu.edu, and I'm always happy to talk more about these topics with everyone. What we're going to be doing here today is we're going to talk a little bit about the concept of information has value and what that means. We're going to think about that in terms of the research process and how this concept connects to, critical research or information use practices. And then we're going to talk about some activities and resources for helping students develop their understanding of this core concept. So jumping in and thinking about what exactly we mean when we talk about information has value. So I know that some folks in the audience will be more familiar with this concept than others. So especially those folks that are librarians. So the Framework for Information Literacy for Higher Education, which came out around 2016, highlighted 6 core information literacy concepts. If you were able to attend the Threshold Concepts workshop a couple of weeks ago, basically what the framework tries to do is highlight threshold concepts related to research and information. So what are the things, those sort of core conceptual understandings that are broadly shared across experienced researchers, but that students may not yet have grasped, and that may create learning bottlenecks for them, may cause them to get stuck because that there's something that they're missing. So what are sort of the key underlying shared understandings or practices related to research or information across experienced researchers, right? And one of those sort of core concepts that was highlighted was this idea that information has value. All right, so for this activity, I want us to take a minute to think about what does it mean when we think about or hear the phrase information has value. So I'll put this in the chat. We're going to do this as a Jamboard. So I know that many folks have used Jamboards before, but if not, we'll go out and take a look at that Jamboard. You should be able to access that link there in the chat, or you could use the QR code to go ahead and go out to that Jamboard. So what we're thinking about here is, when you hear that phrase, information has value, what comes to mind? What do you think about? What kinds of value? Who does it have value to? What is it about information that is valuable? Right? So we'll think about that and do some sort of collaborative definition building around this concept. So we'll go ahead and go out to that Jamboard. If you haven't used a Jamboard before, the easiest way to add a comment is to go over on the left-hand side, and you should see an option to add a sticky note, and that will allow you to type your response. You can change the color for your sticky note, and you should be able to post your response there. So we'll give everyone a chance to, again, if you feel comfortable sharing, share what it means to you to think of to hear the term information has value. What kinds of value, who is it valuable to, why is information valuable? You can kind of answer this in a broad range of ways. Kate shared in the chat, that Google is discontinuing Jamboard. Yes, I heard that, Kate. I was so sad. So I'll have to think of a new tool to use in the workshops next year. Yeah, absolutely. So some responses coming in from folks. Let's take a look at these. Just gonna move some of them around. So folks are answering this in a variety of different ways, which is great. So some folks are pointing out, why information has value. Information has value because it has impact, right? Information influences the way we see the world culturally and socially. Information leads to answers. Without information, informed decisions cannot be made, right? Information is support of evidence, ideas. Right. So we're looking at information is power. So what it does to us to have information or to not have information. Information one person can make your life easier. Absolutely. So information is valuable. And some folks are pointing out information is valuable, in a monetary sense, right? Information has costs. Research costs money. Yes, information is intellectual property. So information is valuable to the person, right? It's the property of someone who created that or developed that, right? Information has some sort of benefit to life, whether that is born from society guidelines or individual needs. Information helps us make decisions. Yes, it helps us meet a need, health, financial, well-being, right? Academic, social. You guys are so great. You're pointing out so many different ways that information has valuable, right? We can't make decisions without information, right? Absolutely. It leads us to answers. It leads us to what we need to know. Right. Yeah, absolutely. Great. Thank you all so much for sharing your responses there. So we'll go ahead and go back to our workshop slides. All right. So just a quick overview of the concept, and I know that you all, I can tell from your responses that you all have an understanding of this concept, but just a few things that I really wanted to highlight, right? So I want to really emphasize, that information has valuable in many different contexts. As some people pointed out, like it has personal value, has educational value, it has social value. Sometimes it has, actual financial value, but cost, right? To purchase a book, to purchase an article, to purchase a journal subscription. Actual financial value. Because information is so valuable, right? There are many different factors that impact how we can access information and how information is distributed, how it's shared, who has the ability to access information, who has the ability to create information. There are political factors, there are economic factors, there are legal factors, like actual laws about how information can be accessed and shared, right? So this is a really broad concept. On the one hand, I think it seems kind of like almost like common sense. Of course, information has value, but it actually is when you jump into it, there are so many different aspects of it, and so much of it is really complicated when we think about all of the economic and legal and political factors around information and what adds to the value of specific types of information, what means that certain information is not accessible to certain people. There's a lot of factors that really go into this concept. So when we think about this from the perspective of, an individual, right? Someone who has an understanding and also an information creator, and recognizes having rights and responsibilities in both of those areas, right? So they are really able to think critically about the choices that they make around information, how they access information and how they share information, how they, their role as an information creator themselves. And this could be, making decisions about deciding to comply with legal or, ethical restrictions about how information is accessed and shared, but some may make decisions that are contrary to that. Some may think that copyright, they may have oppositions to copyright law, for example. But the key point is that they're really critically understanding these issues, and they're making informed decisions, right, as we talked about their role as an information consumer and their role as an information creator, and thinking about those issues. Highlighting really quickly, I think it's important that this concept really also emphasizes this idea that not everyone is going to have equal access to information. Not everyone is going to have the equal ability to make their voice heard, right? There are certain interests. There are power structures out there related to information. That means that certain individuals or certain groups have less access and less ability to engage with information, to share information. Right? And so, this is a key part of this, is that understanding, because information is valuable, because it, can be a commodity in many ways, that means there's going to be like inherent inequalities in access and in power related to information. Right. So that's a quick overview of the concept. And I want to just take a pause there to see if anyone has any questions, any comments, anyone who wants to add anything to the description, anyone that's familiar with the concept, anything that you want to add. So we'll pause there really quickly just to see if there are anything that anyone would like to share. And again, I apologize for anyone who came in late. Not on screen because we're having some internet connectivity issues. So trying to put as limited demands on the system as possible at the moment. So Emmy shared, I think people's prior experience and knowledge has a big impact on individuals' value of specific information. Yes, that is a really great point, right? And there's some research out there about how different groups value information in different ways. You have like your information sort of circle or community, and different information communities value information in different ways and different types of information. So yes, that is absolutely true. Your prior experience, your prior knowledge, the communities or groups that you are part of will all impact the different ways that information might have value to you, or what is considered to be valuable information. Mm-hmm. Great, thank you so much for sharing that. All right, so let's move ahead and we'll think about this in connection to some of the practices that we engage in as in terms of research and information use. So I wanted to give you all a chance to think about this as well. So thinking about whether or not, where you see a lack of understanding of this concept leading to challenges that your students experience. So how do you see this concept as connecting with the issues that your students are having, or the learning bottlenecks that students might be having? Or if the other way around, you can think of it as, once a student really gets this concept, what is going to make more sense to them, right? What parts of the research process will make more sense to them? What will they understand that they didn't understand before once they grasp this concept? So we'll do this again as a Jamboard, and go out to that same Jamboard. So you should be able to use the same link, should be able to be there out there. You'll just turn to the next page using the little arrows up at the top there. So I'll let you all have a chance to think about this. Again, you can think of it from the perspective of, when my students don't understand this, how does that manifest? What are the challenges or problems associated with a lack of understanding of this concept? Or you can think about it as, once my students do get this concept, what makes more sense to them? What do they understand that they didn't understand before? So we'll pause here and let folks have a chance to share their responses. So as we look at some of the responses coming here, so I see several responses linked around the theme of citation, right? So once students have an understanding of the concept of information has value, that's when, the idea of why citations are so important really starts to kick in, right? Students may think about, citation from the perspective of, they're just doing this like to punish me. It's all like a punitive process, right? But understanding the value of information, then you start to really get why citations are so important, why there is so much emphasis put on that process. So I see lots of comments around there. One person commented, I find that undergraduate students are sometimes surprised that scholarly articles aren't available online for free. And Info Has Value helps explain this. Yeah, absolutely, right? So why they can access certain information easily and certain information they can't access easily, right? They'll have a better understanding of why that is if they understand the value of information. Now, they still may think that it's not fair, which I think is totally legitimate. But we'll at least have an understanding of why certain sources may not be available to them. Right. Let's see. Learning that information is valuable makes searching for better articles a practice for students rather than just finding the first ones. Yes, right. So understanding the actual value that they are getting from the source, that it's worth more to them to take the time to find a really good information source than to, use a less good source that they can find easily. Absolutely. Yeah. Someone wrote, when information isn't shared equitably, equally, it perpetuates personal and cultural divides. Yes, that is a great point. Absolutely. Students don't know where to find information, how to evaluate information. That's definitely connected, right? Students sometimes struggle to understand how they can benefit connecting their own work to existing ideas. So they don't see the value of making those connections. Absolutely. Real problems occur when students leave the university and lose access to databases. Yes, completely agree. Right. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later on, but in a lot of ways, especially I know that it's a concern that some librarians have, right? We spend a lot of time teaching students how to use resources that they won't have access to once they graduate. That is a concern for sure. All right. Thank you all so much for sharing your ideas for how this is connected to the practices that you're seeing with your students. So we'll go ahead and go back to our presentation here. So there's a few things that I wanted to highlight in relation to this concept. And first one I want to emphasize is, and this is in the framework as well, right, is, our students, most of them have grown up in a time when it seems like almost all of the information that they need is available online for free. And so when they do get into those situations where they encounter paywalls for the first time, for example, they don't understand why, because they've grown up with, most of them, with very easy access to the internet and being able to search for information very quickly and easily. And so I think, this creates a real, challenge for students to make sometimes that understanding of why information sources are valuable. Wanted to highlight a few additional things, right? Because most of the information that we access now is accessed online, it's often, intangible. And of course, that's not always the case. But how many of our students are really doing research with print books anymore or print journals? Right? They're accessing material that is out there somewhere else. It's not something that it feels like they're actually taking something off a shelf or pulling something off a shelf. Right. And so a lot of the costs of information or the value related to information is hidden. Right. One of those things is just how long it actually takes to create certain information projects. I know when I've talked to students before and, explain, the article writing and review process and all of that can take, a year, 2 years, 3 years. That's often a surprise to students because that labor is hidden, right? They don't see that. They see the final product, but they don't see all that went into behind it, right? The cost of internet access and related technology, it might seem like, well, because I can access Google for free, then that's free, but really they're still paying for it, right? Money spent by universities to provide access to information, a lot of that gets hidden, right, to students. They have all of this information now. I was actually, when I was preparing this workshop, I went and was trying to find an article that was blocked by a paywall. And I had trouble finding one because all of my searches go through, Google Scholar, goes through the library system. So everything just pops up as free. So I actually had trouble finding an article that I couldn't access, as an example. And so when that happens to students, and then as we talked about, when they leave that university environment and now those paywalls are popping up all over the place, they don't understand why they had access to that before, that if someone was actually paying for that, right? Their tuition was paying for that because the libraries are paying for that. And then, of course, the hidden cost of just what you're giving up when you get free services, like, free search engines, free search tools. The famous phrase out there, right? If the product is free, you're the product, right? So companies are getting a lot from providing those free services to us. And so all of that can be really hidden for students, and something that really needs to, be pointed out and discussed so that they are able to make critical decisions about information and able to have an understanding of the broader information environment. Let's see some comments coming in. Why we as librarians should be reminding them that their state and public libraries also provide access to databases. Good point. Yes, definitely fortunate to live in a city with a well-funded public library system. Absolutely. Emmy shared, I find a lot of students have no problem finding information through semi-legal ways. Students seem willing to circumvent barriers to and find important information. And that's a really, really good point. I actually had a situation recently where someone I knew posted PDFs of the class textbooks right to their page, and those PDFs were probably protected by copyright, and so, but that person thought that they were doing a good deed, right? Because they were sharing the information with everyone who needed it. So it's tricky. Absolutely. All right, let's slide here. So as we already mentioned, some of the learning bottlenecks related to this: frustration when they do encounter paywalls, restrictions, and a willingness to go around them, or to settle for information that they can find easily available rather than going the legal route or being aware of all of the options that might be available to them. Just yesterday, I'm at a PhD program, and one of my fellow students said that they paid for access to newspapers.com. And I said, you could access all of those through the library. And they were like, oh, yeah, right. And this was a graduate student who hadn't thought about that. So, and there's lots of ways that students can either go around getting information, they settle for less, or they end up paying for things themselves that they shouldn't be paying for because the libraries have already paid for it for them. There was a lot of comments about citation on the Jamboard. Right. And obviously an understanding of information has value is really closely connected to the idea of citations, right? Because information seems to be so freely available out there, because all of that hidden labor that they don't see, it may make it harder for students to really understand the need to cite. Anyone can access this resource for free. Why is it so important that they cite? Also, a lot of the information that students are encountering is really disconnected from the original source, right? Disconnected from the original container, right? So they find an article, but they don't actually find the journal. They find a chapter, but they don't find the book. A news article, but they don't actually see the actual newspaper or news site. So everything is kind of disconnected from each other. And so in that situation, it can be easy to see why someone would think, well, what does it really matter? Everyone has access to this freely out there. So why do we really need to cite it? And I just wanted to highlight, of course, this frame highlights a lot about concepts like copyright and intellectual property and public domain. And these are all really complicated terms. These are terms that are not universal. And so developing an understanding of these concepts can be really tricky. And often, we don't have a lot of time in our roles to really dive into teaching some of the complex issues. And so students may have a very limited awareness of a lot of these topics. I asked some students the other day, how many of you have copyright over anything? And most of them said no. And I said, likely all of you do. If you've ever posted a picture that you took online, you have the copyright of that picture. And that was something that they did not know, right? Because it's a really complicated topic for sure. Kate, understanding containers involves looking at real items in brick and mortar settings, which we just don't often have anymore. And then, of course, the digital divide, of course, is closely related, as we've talked about as well, that not everyone is going to have the same access to information. And this is something that I think that a lot of students can really struggle with. Many students, I think, are not aware of their information privilege. And I have talked to students about this and said, how many students do you think have trouble accessing information? And there will be some that will very confidently say, no, not here. Maybe in other places, that might be the issue. And then there'll be that one tentative student that pops up and says, I have to go to my in-laws' house to use the internet, or I have to go to a coffee shop to use the internet. I have to come to the library because I don't have my own. All right. And so it's, a lot of students have had a lot of information privilege and are unaware that that's not the case for others. Let's see. And then this concept, I think, is also really closely related to issues of online privacy and online safety. Students may not recognize the value of their own information, how much they're actually giving away by what they post online, how they could be putting themselves into dangerous situations in terms of privacy, in terms of safety. So they may not really be aware of how much their information is being collected and being used for. And some do, but I think in some cases there are still situations where it's not quite clear how much I'm actually giving away by sharing all of this information. And then I think this might be the last part of this section. Yeah. So I just wanted to highlight really quickly. Another challenge I think with this concept is I think that students think of themselves as information consumers. I think that's a sort of a natural way for them to think about themselves, but really thinking about themselves as information creators, I think can be more challenging, right? That they are contributing to an information marketplace or an information environment when they are posting and sharing and creating, right? And that they have rights and responsibilities as information creators, right? So they have to think of themselves as being in both of those roles. So to sum up with this one, I think that, once students do develop an understanding of this concept, some of the key practices or key dispositions, right, that they'll have a better understanding of the time and effort that's required to create information. And so will be more likely to give appropriate attribution or citation. They'll have a better understanding of those issues of information access and inequality and how that might impact them, right? Thinking about a student who is going into certain fields and is going to be having clients, needing to recognize that their clients may not have access to the same information that they do and what that might mean for them. Understanding the commodification of their own information and thinking critically about what they are willing to share. Thinking about licensing, for example, for their own creative works. So those are some of the associated practices and dispositions. So I'll pause there to see if there are any questions or comments. I see we have a couple comments in the chat. Please add any additional questions or comments that you have. Privacy issues exacerbated by AI. Yes, absolutely. And Kate, I was thinking earlier, as I was putting this together, I didn't really have a section on AI in here, but AI is definitely creating a lot of challenges related to this concept that I think need to be explored more deeply. And thank you. Rebecca shared a Fresh Air interview, Your Face Belongs to Us, for folks that are interested in copyright, privacy, and face recognition tech. So thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. Any other questions, thoughts that folks have related to this concept? The next section is really just going to jump into some resources and some activities that could be helpful for helping students to develop an understanding of this concept. Wanted to see really quickly if anyone has any additional comments. All right, so some teaching activities and resources. So I wanted to share, I put together just a quick online guide to this that's freely available to anyone. And I'll share the link in the follow-up email with everyone, but this is just like a quick overview guide if you want something to show students really quick and simple that they can look at to start developing an understanding of this concept. This resource is available. And then there's lots of videos at colleges that have put together, libraries that have put together videos on this concept. So I put together a few of the ones that have been my favorites. that look at this concept from a lot of different angles. So if you're looking for something in the 3 to 5 minute range, really quick to help students develop their understanding of this concept, these are some great resources I think that you can start with. So how can we develop our understanding of this concept? So some folks that have been to workshops before know I love true-false activities. On the one hand, they are so simple, but on the other hand, that you can really get some helpful, useful information, useful feedback from students on what they understand or think they understand with some simple true-false statements. And this works with instructors as well. For those folks out there that work with instructors, I've done these kinds of activities, of course, with instructors as well, and they really help. So just giving some students statements related to information has value. I've given you a few examples up here, such as how much it costs to purchase a scholarly article, how long it takes to write a scholarly article. And so, just having students work through these statements, which ones they think are true, which ones they think are false, are there any that, they're not sure about? And then you can use this to generate an additional discussion on, why might it cost $50 to buy an article? Who's getting that money? Is it going to the author? Probably not. Is it going to the publisher? Yeah, right. So, you can use those to get an understanding of what students think or know about this concept. And then each statement can be used to generate additional discussion so that you can start getting students to, start thinking critically about this topic. And I have versions of all of these assignments in the folder. If anyone wants to take a look at that in the workshop materials folder, I have lots of sample activities there. Another quick activity is one that you could just kind of do what we did. So at the beginning, I had you all do that collaborative definition building, thinking about what does this term mean to you? So you could have students do something similar to that. Probably won't be able to use Jamboard much longer for it anymore, but you could use, a Menti or Padlet or some other tool, have students develop their initial response of what they think that term means. Then, provide them with one of the videos or provide them with the guide, have them, take a look at that and think through that, and then have them share their understanding again so that they're giving their initial definition and their initial understanding, learning a little bit about the concept, and then coming back together to do sort of a collaborative definition building as a class. Here's what we mean when we talk about and think about information has value. Here are the different aspects of that concept. Here's a quick little activity. We're going to play a quick game of The Price is Right. So we have an information package here. The information package consists of 4 items: a book called History of American Education, a journal article that was published in Higher Education Policy, an individual subscription to the journal Review of Higher Education, and a documentary called Stolen Education. So anyone would like to make a guess in the chat how much you think that this information package would cost? So we have A, between $25 and $50, B, between $75 and $100, C, between $125 and $150, or D, more than $175. So we got lots of comments coming in. Lots of folks are guessing D, right? We have a few folks guess B, a few folks with, I see a C in there. So I totally understand why the majority of folks guess D. For this particular package, the answer is really C. But I could certainly see why everyone would guess D as well. So the book cost about $25. The journal article cost about $40. The subscription, I think, was like $80, so somewhere in there. And that was an individual journal subscription, not like an institutional subscription. And the documentary was actually, I think only like $10. So, there's different ways that you could do this with different information packages. Some would be a lot more expensive if you added in like institutional database subscription or journal subscription. Obviously, the price would really go up. but this is an activity that I've done before with students, and get them thinking about why they're making their guesses, why they think this might cost that, why this might cost that. And then, that could again lead into a discussion. Well, that book costs, around $25. Who is getting the money for that book? How much does the author actually get from that book? And who else is making profit from that book? For the journal article, is the author getting any money at all for that article? Right. So, I think that this kind of activity, again, I've done with students, and it tends to be fun, but it also does get to the point that, all of these things, there's a cost associated with all of them. So that's just one quick activity that you could use to get a discussion going on information has value. And you could, obviously, if you're in the disciplines in a particular field, gear it toward the information sources in your particular field and have students think about how much those sources are costing. Let's see. Another activity really quickly I wanted us to go out and do. So I'm going to put this link in the chat here again. So that last link there takes you out to an example, and that's an article. So I wanted to give everyone a chance to go out and take a look at that article really quickly. And then, if you feel comfortable sharing, what is the value of this article to you as a researcher, as a scholar? So we'll go ahead and try to get out there really quickly. I think I've got it out myself. No, we did have it up, and I get down back here. So here is the article for folks to take a look at really quickly. Hopefully everyone is seeing this. So as you take a look through the article really quickly, scroll down just so everyone has a chance to see that. And I don't expect everyone to sort of actually read the article really carefully. You can just kind of skim through and take a look at materials there. So what is valuable about this article, or what is not, what creates a concern related to the value of this article? If you feel comfortable sharing in the chat, any thoughts that you have related to the value of this article, go ahead and share. So Kate shared redactions limit value somewhat. Why do the redactions limit value? So Emmy shared, data information hiding decreases value of information contained, right? Big problem in my field, physics, as the government, military could deem certain information secret, which prevents others from building on it. Yeah. Right. So as, right, go out the article one more time, try to get out there. There it is. So as you see, right, in the articles, all of the citations have been redacted. The authors' names have been redacted. And so if you think about the value of this as a source, right, it could be valuable, as someone mentioned, right, sort of a single-sided study. It's an example of the type of study that someone could do. You might get, good information about this particular study. But what do we do with this information after it if we don't know anything about the citations, right? So Brooke had, where did they draw from, right? So we don't know anything now about the conversation that took place before this article was published because all of the citations have been redacted, right? So we don't know where the authors got their information, right? Dr. Linney shared, right? Redaction leads to inability to assess the limitations of the study or ability to verify credibility of sources, right? So we don't know what has been cited here. We don't know how relevant those citations are. We can't go back and check those citations, right? The authors' names have been removed. So you could potentially find out, who wrote this article, but it's still limiting some of the information that's available about this that would allow you to evaluate the credibility of the source, right? So this is an article, and this was an article that I wrote with some colleagues. So I just went through and just did some quick redactions there on that. And I think that this could be a really interesting and useful activity to do with students, right? Where we give them an article where they can't access the citations, and have them answer some questions and think about what that means for their understanding and their ability to use that article. They might get some valuable data out of it, but it is going to be more limited because they won't have, the ability to easily access the previous research that has been done. They won't be able to identify who the key scholars are in that field, what the expertise of the authors are. And so it's going to limit their ability to actually use that information effectively without that information. So I do think that kind of activity where, we take away something that is in that article and let students think about how that impacts that could be a really helpful activity to do with students. Another activity I wanted to share, and this one is based on James Lang's book, Small Teaching. He talks about an activity that he does called the Minute Thesis. And this is sort of building on that. And basically the idea of this activity is to have students develop an understanding of this idea of information has value, and then provide them with a list of related concepts such as plagiarism, copyright, digital privacy, and then have them make the connections. So they, instead of, us telling them that this is connected to copyright or this is connected to plagiarism, they have to tell you, how does plagiarism connect to the concept of information has value in like one sentence or two sentences, right? So they have to create those connections themselves. I do think this students would need a little bit more advanced knowledge about some of these topics to even be able to start making those connections. But maybe with a little bit more advanced students, you could get them to start making those connections themselves, creating that sort of thesis of how this is connected to this through that activity. Another activity is one that you could use. I call this one exploring value and access, but basically each group of students would be given a different source. And then they would answer the same questions related to that source, such as how much time they think was involved in creating that source, who profits from that source, what does the author get, who else might have profited, what is the value of this source to the creator, to the user, right? So they're looking at, each group is looking at different kinds of sources. And then they could come back together for a discussion, thinking about, how the creation time differs for a scholarly article versus a blog post. What the profit might differ between those different kinds of sources. Who might those sources be valuable to? And not saying that a blog post can't be valuable, because it definitely can, but they may be valuable in different contexts. And so getting students to kind of try to think about those kinds of questions. And then again, if they needed to purchase that source, how much might it cost? So lots of questions just to get students critically thinking about some of these questions and issues related to value. Yeah, Rebecca, I once had a student who thought researchers get the money every time her article is purchased. Yes, absolutely. Okay. And then another potential activity that you could do is to have students create an infographic. So this is something that we do in one of the classes that we teach when we talk about digital privacy and digital safety. So students identifying an issue related to digital privacy or digital safety. So for example, we give them a couple of different articles to choose from. One is, for example, about someone who was being stalked, and they posted a picture of themselves, and they thought that they had removed all of the identifying information, but the person was able to find them by looking at the reflection in their eye. and seeing what they were able to locate where they were based on that. And so, that was like an extreme case, but, we give them some articles thinking about this issue of digital privacy or digital safety, and then they have to create an infographic telling other students about this as an issue. And what we really like about this kind of assignment is not only are they, they're being an information creator in this situation, and that this is a chance where you can talk about how would you license this information. If you wanted to license your infographic, what license would you choose? You could do that kind of activity as well. So it really gets at a lot of different concepts related to information has value. Simulated information inequality. This is one I've done a couple times, and it's always really interesting. But basically, the idea is to have all of the students have one question that they have to answer, but they each have different levels of information access that are allowed to them. So one group might be only able to use one source. Another group might be able to use 2 or 3 sources. A third group might be able to use a particular database. A fourth group is able to access anything that they want. And how their answers differ based on the amount of information that they have available to them. And so again, I've done this before, and it's worked really well because, they have to answer based on just what they know, based on what their information is provided. So that group that is only limited to one source is going to have, very limited opportunity to actually explore or answer that question. So that's a fun activity and really interesting, I think, activity to do with students. And I think this is the last one. This one is thinking about the value of different types of information within a particular discipline, and what types of sources or what types of information is more valued in a discipline. So this is something that you could do with students where they go through the reference list of articles and they highlight the different types of sources that are used. So in this case, for example, the pink highlights are scholarly journal articles. The purple is a book chapter. The green is a report, right? And so that they would go through and highlight and like categorize all of the different references that they have. And then they could compare their responses. 80% of the sources that are cited in this are scholarly journal articles. 90% of the sources are cited are scholarly journal articles. So they start to get an idea of what types of sources are most valuable in the field themselves. And I think it's also just fun, sometimes just going through and being able to highlight or mark something up is fun as well. So I think that could be a great discipline, great activity thinking about in your particular discipline, what are the sources that are valued. So I just put some additional resources there, some activities that other folks put together that I found interesting. So I wanted to share those. Then I'll pause here as we come to the end. So I've shared some activities. Hopefully some of those sound like ones that would be interesting for you to try with your students. Some resources. We'll pause here to open it up for any final questions, comments, thoughts that folks have about this concept. If you have an idea of how you've taught this concept that you would like to share, we'd love to hear that as well. So we'll open it up for comments. Kate shared government funded research is not always openly available. Sigh. Yes, that is definitely a concern, Kate. Mm-hmm. So as we come to the end, just a couple of things. So there will not be a workshop next week because I will be out of the country, but we will be back the following week with our last 2 workshops for this fall workshop series. So I'll send everyone a follow-up email with a link to the slides, all of the activities, registration for the next couple of workshops. If you have any questions, comments, thoughts, please feel free to send me an email. And I will go ahead and stop the recording for now, but I will stick around for a couple minutes in case there are any last comments or thoughts that folks would like to share.